Shalom. This will be the last installment of our series on the commentary of Abarbanel on the Torah. In our previous shiurim, we saw various aspects of this perush. We saw Abarbanel's sensitivity to pattern and to structure. We saw his use of symbolism, and we saw in general his all-in-all comprehensive approach to parashanut. Today, I'd like to focus on Abarbanel as a philosopher. This is certainly an important part of who he was, and Abarbanel frequently gives a philosophical discourse in the course of his commentary on the Torah. Of course, he does this when the discourse is relevant to the understanding of the text. Now, the difference between a philosophical discourse and the direct commentary on the Torah is when we're talking about commentary, of course, the discussion revolves around textual considerations. Whereas in the case of a philosophical discussion, we're talking about a question which is raised by the text, but the considerations and the proofs and the different arguments in favor, pro and con, not necessarily textual, but more philosophical, more theoretical. Now, a major topic in Behar-Bechukotai is, of course, the brachot and the klalot, which in the language of philosophy, we're talking about reward and punishment. One of the 13 principles of faith, according to the Rambam, a very important idea in our tradition. But it raises a host of issues, a host of questions, which preoccupied the thinkers of the Jewish philosophical tradition. And Abarbanel here devotes himself to this discussion of one of them, which relates to the text. The Torah, when it talks about the reward and punishment in Behar-Bechukotai, it gives us the blessings and the curses. The overriding characteristic of all these promises is that they occur in this world. We're talking about physical blessings and physical curses. Whether there will be rain, the crops will grow, you will have peace, and so on. And of course, the curses are the opposite. You will have problems with your enemies from around, and the crops will not grow, and so forth. However, Abarbanel says that our tradition teaches us, and we actually know, that there's an afterlife. There's olam haba, not only olam hazeh. Not only that, but the main place where the person receives his retribution, good or bad, for what he did during his lifetime is in the afterlife, in olam haba. Abarbanel says, I'm not going to go into the question of proving this premise. We're assuming it. Abarbanel says, I've discussed this issue itself, that is the immortality of the soul and the actuality of the afterlife. That I've discussed in other places. He says, I wrote a book called Tzedek Olamim, in which I prove this premise to be true. We don't have that book, Tzedek Olamim, but anyway, Abarbanel says, I'm not going to get into that. But the premise of this question is, given that that's true, why doesn't the Torah describe the afterlife? Why doesn't the Torah say that if you keep the mitzvot, you will be in olam haba, you'll get to Gan Eden, and there you will enjoy eternal bliss. And if you don't, then you'll go to the other place, to the Gehinnom, and you can suffer very greatly. Abarbanel says that this question, of course, is not a new one, and it preoccupied thinkers of previous generations. Abarbanel says, I'm going to educate you as to 7 answers to this question, which were given by the scholars of previous generations. Abarbanel does this in the style of Beit Hillel. That is, first he gives answers, some of which he does not agree with so much, but the answer which he agrees with, he leaves for last. Now, we won't get to discuss all of these answers today, but I hope we will be able to have a good look at a good part of these answers. Parenthetically, I'll mention that the commentator Kli Yakar of the 17th century, he thought that this discussion of Abarbanel was very important, and he included it in his own commentary on the Torah, but he did this in an abridged form, in a condensed form. His abridgment, of course, is a good one, but there's a lot to be gained from seeing the original in the Abarbanel himself. So what is the first answer that Abarbanel offers to us for this question? This first answer was given by the Rambam. And the Rambam says, the question is not really a question. What was the question? Why does the Torah promise us as a reward and as punishment things that occur in this world and not in the afterlife? The Rambam said, the Torah here is not talking about reward and punishment at all. That's not what the Torah wants to tell us. That if you do these mitzvot, your reward will be such and such. If you don't do them, then you'll be punished in such a way. No, because it's clear that the reward and the punishment is in the next world, and that goes without saying. The Torah merely means to say that if you keep the mitzvot, and if this is your upmost desire to live in the way that the Torah requires, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will arrange the world in such a way that it will be easy for you. In other words, the world will cooperate with your desire to keep the mitzvot, and if you don't want to do it and you stray from the mitzvot, then the world will react in such a way that even if you wanted to, you couldn't do it. This is a promise which HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes, that I'll follow your lead. If you want to keep the mitzvot, don't worry, the world will set itself up in such a way that you can do it. And the Rambam says, and in fact, the Torah does not talk about reward and punishment, and there's a reason for that. Why? Why does the Torah talk about reward and punishment? Because on the face of it, reward and punishment, if spelled out by the Torah, there could be an incentive, a way of getting people to encourage them to keep the mitzvot. The Rambam says the Torah didn't want to discuss this because the Torah was not interested in setting up reward as an aim of the person to keep mitzvot. Because a person who keeps the mitzvot because he wants to get the reward for them, that's avodah shelo lishma. The Rambam thinks that's an inferior level of avodat Hashem, and a person ideally should do the mitzvah because it's the right thing to do, not because he's going to get a reward for it. And therefore, the Torah is not really discussing reward at all. Okay, so that's the Rambam's approach. Abarbanel says, I don't agree with this. And in the other work which I wrote, he says, I explained why. He doesn't explain why here he disagrees with it. But we know that one reason that Abarbanel disagrees with it is because Abarbanel doesn't agree with the Rambam's claim that serving Hashem for the sake of reward is an inferior level of avodat Hashem. And Abarbanel is against that idea. He says this in his commentary on Masechet Avot. He goes to great length to demonstrate this, and he says, look, the Torah does this very often. Very often the Torah tries to give us an incentive to keep the mitzvot. L'man tichyu, l'tov lachem, right? It's for your own good. The Torah emphasizes this many, many times. So the fact that we do what the Torah had in mind certainly doesn't mean that what we do is inferior. Okay, but that is the first answer. Okay, I'm going now to skip the second one and go to the third answer that Abarbanel gives us. He says that the question, it's going to sound like the Rambam again. The question is not a question. Right? What did we ask? Why didn't the Torah specify the reward that you're going to get in Olam Haba for keeping the mitzvot? Abarbanel says, in the name of a certain scholar whom I don't know who he means, Rabbeinu Bachye Hazaken, but Rabbeinu Bachye Hazaken said that the fact that the soul who keeps the mitzvot goes to Olam Haba, to Gan Eden, and there he experiences eternal bliss, that's not a reward. That's a natural result. It goes without saying that a person who, during his whole lifetime, sanctifies himself and purifies himself, after he dies, he's going to go to the place where he should go. That's the Olam Haba, it's Gan Eden. Where else would he go? That's just a natural result. In other words, he himself kind of defined his path, his future path, the way that he'll go after he leaves this world. A reward is something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes out of his way to do in exchange for what you did. In other words, so the fact that you will be physically rewarded with rain and with wealth and with peace for the good things that you do, that's not a natural result. That's something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do, that he has to intervene in the way the world runs and see that if you're worthy, then he'll give you this reward. But this is a reward. But again, the fact that you go to Olam Haba, that's not a reward, it's simply a natural result. And of course the opposite, if you don't keep the Torah, the fact that you'll go to the other place, right, to the Gehinnom, that's also something which the person does to himself, and it goes without saying. So this answer is similar to the Rambam in the sense that, once again, we're saying that the question doesn't begin. Because, right, the question was, why doesn't the Torah specify the reward, the spiritual reward in Olam Haba, and only talks about the physical reward in Olam Hazeh? And the answer is because the physical reward in Olam Haba, that's not a reward. Right, that goes without saying. It doesn't have to be talked about at all. We'll moving on to a second and another answer. This is the second answer that is mentioned by Abarbanel in his list. The question is a question. This he attributes to Ibn Ezra. The question is a question. But the Torah has a reason, and the reason is not a fundamental philosophical reason, but it's, we could say, a pedagogical reason. Because the purpose of talking about the reward and the punishment is to give people an incentive and a reason to keep the mitzvot. If you try to talk to them about Olam Haba, something which is very abstract and which really can't be described, we don't really know what happens there. We can only say in general terms that it's great or that it's awful. But people need something, and if you want to give them an incentive, they need something real and something they can envision, something they can imagine in order to hang on to, particularly if you're talking about the average person. If you're talking about an intellectual or a Talmid Chacham or a person who's very learned, a very spiritual person, so there he's perhaps used to thinking abstractly, and he'll believe you when you tell him that it's worthwhile for you because there's nothing like Olam Haba. But if you're talking about the average person, that won't work, and you have to give an incentive which is something which you can describe in a physical term, which is very clear, and the person will understand the impact in graphic terms. Okay, so that's another approach. If this we can contrast actually with the Rambam again, because the Rambam, when he said that the Torah doesn't want to discuss reward at all, because the Torah expects us to keep the mitzvot not for the sake of reward. So the Rambam here is talking about a very high level. The Torah is aiming for the ideal, for the utopian ideal, how you should keep the mitzvot, without any consideration of the reward of what's coming to you as a result. Ibn Ezra is taking a different approach. He's saying the Torah is not only talks to us in ideal terms. The Torah knows that it's talking to people that are not necessarily on that high level, and you have to worry about them as well. So to educate and to refine and to give an incentive to people like that, you have to talk in their language, and that's what the Torah is doing here. Let's move on to another answer which Abarbanel offers. Right, again, the question was, why does the Torah not discuss the spiritual reward that awaits us for the mitzvot? So once again, this answer claims that the premise of the question is wrong. Right? Who told you that the Torah is not addressing at all the spiritual reward? If you look in the brachot that the Torah describes here, in Bechukotai the Torah says, "V'talachti b'tochachem, v'natati mishkani b'tochachem, v'ayiti lechem l'Elyakim, v'atem tiyu li la'am." In other words, the Torah is describing a situation in which we are close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close to us. He walks in our midst. His sanctuary is in our midst, and the sanctuary here is, of course, not only the physical sanctuary, because that's there. When the Torah says, "Natati mishkani b'tochachem," we're talking about the actual presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the actual Shekhinah will be with us. And this is in essence what we're talking about when we say the reward in Olam Haba. Olam Haba is a place where a person enjoys the bliss of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's right. If there are any descriptions in Chazal exactly what Olam Haba means, so this appears. Chazal say that this is a place where the tzaddikim are close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, of course, the Torah describes this taking place in Olam Hazeh. In Olam Hazeh, the soul is still connected to its physical enclosure, its physical shell, and we can understand from here that if this is true in Olam Hazeh, how much more so will it be true in Olam Haba, when we're free of our physical limitations, and we can enjoy the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a much higher level. So there, this will certainly be true. Of course, Abarbanel admits that in this world, people will experience this on varying levels. In other words, if we keep the mitzvot, so the experience of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world is something which we can say a tzaddik will feel, a chassid, a person who is a very spiritual person will feel, certainly a navi. But nevertheless, even if we see that this reality is true with these special people, so what that means is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. So then, in fact, once again, we're kind of canceling the premise of the question, right? The question was, why doesn't the Torah talk about the spiritual reward in Olam Haba? The Torah does talk about the spiritual reward, but it says that it occurs even in Olam Hazeh, certainly kal vachomer in Olam Haba. Parenthetically, you can see the same kind of transition, I think, in the first perek of Mesilat Yesharim, where the author Ramchal begins by saying that a person's aim is to reach Olam Haba. That has to be his goal. But afterwards, in the same perek, he kind of moves from there into the aim of experiencing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Olam Hazeh. That even through the medium of Kiyum Mitzvot, and while you're being Mekayim the Mitzvot, that draws you close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is essentially the same thing that we're talking about when we say getting to Olam Haba. Okay, let's talk about one more answer. This is the final answer that Abarbanel offers. He says that this was given by Sefer HaIkarim, and this is, and it has roots also in the Perush Ramban al Torah, and this is the answer really which Abarbanel agrees with. He's saying the question is a good question. Really, there are two types of reward. There's reward b'olam hazeh and there's reward b'olam haba. However, there's a reason why the Torah talks about the reward b'olam hazeh, and this is because the purpose of these brachot and klalot is a kritat brit, to make a covenant between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael, and this is primarily a covenant with the tzibur, with the nation of Am Yisrael. And therefore, when the Torah promises reward and punishment, we're talking about reward and punishment for Am Yisrael as a whole, as a community, as a nation. Now, the reward for the community is a physical reward. The nation will prosper. It will have peace. It will be wealthy. There won't be any sicknesses and so on. But when we're talking about the individual, there the reward and the punishment is something which is only ba'olam haba, because ba'olam hazeh if the nation, for example, is punished because for the reason being that the nation as a whole misbehaves or doesn't keep the way of Hashem, even though there are some individuals who do, or are tzaddikim, so it's very likely that these individuals will suffer as a result simply of the fact that they're part of the nation. So there's some kind of injustice going on here. So we can't say that the individual here is getting his just reward. The place where the individual gets his just reward, where the accounting is precise, that's ba'olam haba. As Chazal say in the case of where the Torah talks about kibur va'em or shiluach haken, l'man yarichun yamecha le'olam shekulo ora le'yom shekulo aroch l'man yitavach le'olam shekulo tov. Right, despite any calamities or any good fortune which the person did not deserve, b'olam hazeh, in olam haba everything will be set straight. So then olam haba is oriented towards reward and punishment towards the individual, but here the Torah is concerned with reward and punishment for the people as a whole. And the people as a whole, they're meant to survive, thrive, and sanctify the name of Hashem as a nation. And therefore the reward and punishment in the Behar-Bechukotai is phrased in these general physical terms, which is something which is appropriate for the nation as a whole. So Abarbanel sums up his discussion here, and he says, right, I gave you 6 ways to answer this question. Right, and there's this problem, this question, which many people are bothered by. Right, the Rabbi here is using a sentence from the Parashat HaShavua, from the Brachot, that if your enemy comes out to you to attack you on one path, the bracha will be that he will flee from you in 7 different directions. That's what happened here, says Abarbanel. There's one argument here which appears to be an attack or a challenge to our faith. You know, if it's true that there's a reward and punishment, b'olam haba, why doesn't the Torah talk about it? But we have some very good reasons, some very good explanations why this is true. And Kli Yakar also, he liked this phrase that Abarbanel used here to sum up the discussion, and he uses it himself also. So we can close, I think, by expressing our desire and our prayer that this pasuk be fulfilled, this bracha be fulfilled, both when we're talking about attacks and challenges of a spiritual and intellectual nature, and also in the literal sense. May we be zocher to the fulfillment of this bracha and all the other brachot that we have in our parasha.